Okay, normally I like to take you along at every step of the way, but this last little project is probably one of the most frustrating and involved parts of the build, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. It's wildly different from what I did on the Daytona as far as it's the cowl area and the windshield wiper setup. I did an entirely custom setup on the Daytona with removable panels. It was quite elaborate, so I was trying to leave this one as stock as possible. That's very difficult. It's a very confined space that you have to work with up front in this car. There's no real allowance for the room for the wiper systems that are traditionally on the B bodies. So you got to kind of make room. A good friend of mine, Kirk Simmons, out of Lebanon, Tennessee, had a pretty good system that he worked out. He did one of these with a Roadrunner body for his dad, and he had a pretty slick system that he came up with. I didn't do exactly what he did, but I borrowed heavily from his concept, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But in the meantime, as you can see, I went ahead and spot primed all of the jams and some of the bare metal with a 2K primer that you can get, in a rattle can now. You push this in, and it has an activator in it, and you shake it up. As a pot life of about 4 days, so it's best to get everything ready that you're going to work with as far as spraying, so that you can do it all in one go. So you don't waste this stuff. It's pretty pricey, but it's nice to have it, so you don't have to set up the car in a booth situation and or get spray paint all over your shop. Anyways, I did all that, and then proceeded to do a little bit of clearance work up front. And what I have now is basically the windshield wiper operation systems just mocked up. It's in the mock-up position. Everything here is in a temporary state, and I'll show you what my intentions are here in a minute. These are new, or refurbished I should say, pivot points for the wipers, and because the old ones were frozen solid, the aluminum and steel shafts don't like each other after a while, dissimilar metals. And as per Kirk's car, he modified his arms to reduce the profile of them, and they're in the up position now. In the regular B bodies, in your stock B body, this is pointed in a downward direction, so it goes in a slope back that way, and your arms are way down in underneath this sub cowl. But there's lots of stuff that's in the way here, and so as with his car, he put the arms up and over. Now what he did was he put the operational motor down in here and mounted it to the brake pedal assembly bracket. I didn't want to take all of this out, so that's not possible for what I'm doing here. So he went a little more extensive, and he's got it located down in here. It works fine. It's a little cramped in there, but you just gotta work it out. Anyway, I decided I would try, since traditional B bodies have their motors in the engine compartment up by the firewall, if I would try to locate this new motor that goes with this car in the same spot relative to the wiper arms and see how that worked out. Now, this is the air conditioning box with the heat and cooling exchangers in it. And what I had to do first was do a little clearance work, which, like, there was a bracket right here that held this box to the firewall, and I cut that out. I have one of these carpenter's unitools here that you can just slide along and cut things out flush, which is nice, which is what I did. I didn't want to cut into the box, and I didn't want to have to remove it to get that bracket off either. So you can see the remnants of where it cut across the bracket, and you can see what that looks like under here. It's just a series of ribs, and then that's gone. Again, this box is not going anywhere. It's sitting on top of the transmission hump, and it's pretty solid right there. So with that in mind, I decided to cut the rest of this part of the firewall out and create this pocket here. Now this is going to get a little bit, it's going to be, I have to formalize it. It has to be widened out. I have to put permanent brackets. This is just a temporary bracket made up from the bar that it normally mounts to, abbreviated with a couple of slide feet here, so I could clamp it and move it around and find the position where these rods would pass by the box over here and give me my clearances. So everything here is adjustable in essence, giving me the ability to go back and forth and, you know, shorten things and lengthen things. I have heim joints here, which also there's a right and a left, so you just have to loosen the nut here and then spin this, and you can lengthen this rod or shorten this rod to get it to adjust whatever you need to. Also, on this rod that connects both pivot points here, again, this is a temporary one. I'm going to have to make it a little more robust here. I don't know how much distance I was going to need to adjust here, so I gave myself a lot on this initial piece. But this worked out fine. I just matched the center pivot point to the center pivot point on the old set of arms over here. Here you can see what these look like. This is the stock arm. It just has a stud here and has a little plastic clip that holds it in place. And here's the other one, this one right here on the back side. And then this one is the actuating arm. Anyways, rather than have these, I have, let me see, you know, these, which are much more robust. And they're very forgiving as far as the angles are concerned, because this will pivot in there. So I replaced all this, drilled out these studs on my brackets and replaced them with 1/4-20s and nut and bolted them on so that I had a little stud that I could mount my my heim joints to and make up my rods. So the other thing I had to do was I had to finalize. I made a bracket that slides under here and secures to this sub-cowl area that has a drill hole through it, and there's a nut welded on the top side here, and that secures this to the car through the bottom, where this used to have a bracket that came up here and bolted to the firewall. This kind of substitutes for that. Not like it was moving or anything, but it's just a little bit of extra security there. And then I had to clearance out for the rod itself. The rod does cross across the opening here on the defroster, but it doesn't completely obscure it, so I'll still be able to manage to work a duct around it. It's going to be a little tricky for the two defrosters. It'll be right here and here, and that arm over there intrudes upon that opening a little bit. Again, it's not like I need the entire thing. I can, even if I only have half of that opening to work with, I'll be able to get two defrosters up to the base of the windshield, which is basically what my objective is. I want to get involved with that, which is going to be the next thing that's going to have to be done. With that said, I was surprised that the new motor has the, you can see I also put a stud on there, a long stud here, so that I can clear my center nut here when it rotates. And this center of the stud to the center of the rotation point, believe it or not, here's an old style B-body windshield wiper motor. The center of this stud and the center of this measure almost identical. So with that said, you don't have to really play with the rotation of the shaft. In other words, the distance that this pivot point is on this rotating shaft. In other words, if I drop this down a little bit or if I lengthen it, that controls the sweep of the arms and how far they go to either extent. Matching this up like this so closely ends up putting me very close to the neighborhood of what I have to be as far as the sweep of these windshield wipers. I didn't change the pivot points. So that's the same geometry, and the main thing is that piece right there measures the same. So with all of those three things together, we should be pretty close to what we need. Again, it's something that'll have to be determined after I get the cowl on or the cowl mocked up. I have to put everything back into this car, plug everything back in, because one of the things that has to be done is the wipers have to be run and allowed to, the motor has to come to its resting, parked position. When that's in its parked position, the rotation of that motor, the arm has to be pulled off, and you have to adjust the wipers so that they are actually in the parked position. So that'll have to be done further down the line too. So there's a lot more work that has to be done. All of this has to be made up a little bit more robust. Again, I was just doing things to be able to adjust things. So I put a little slide bar on here that tightens up against this shaft. It has a couple drill holes so that I could attach various length arms so I could swing this in and out. I ended up having to put a bend in it so that this was a little bit more square, so that it had enough rotation in the ball in order to miss everything. So like I said, this, you can move it back and forth to get this in the ideal location. But anyway, I wish I could have brought you along for every little bit of this, but between the phone screwing up and some things that I was trying to do that wasn't working out, and I had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, we're close to settling on something here right now. And I'll get this thing hooked up real quick and give you a little demonstration of how it runs. Okay, I'm going to give it a little run now, and you can see how this thing is operating so far. Come around the other side here, be able to see it a little bit better. You see how it tucks down into here. Also, it crosses over this, but there is some space behind it. This arm is barely missing that box right now. I'll give it a little more clearance. And you can see the rotation here. It's kind of deceptive. This is both rocking back and forth, which is allowed for with these heims. And this is also, so you can see it's a funny angle. It's like it's going back and forth like a snake, but also it's able to move because of those heim joints. So that's kind of funky, but that's seems to be working as far as reciprocating it. And we'll have to see how the arms sweep back and forth once I get a mock-up windshield in here and I get all this other stuff tidied up a bit and some permanent fixtures made. Incidentally, the reason that this is all going to be cut out is the idea is going to be that there'll be a sealed door here, and hopefully, if I engineer it right, you'll be able to pull the motor out from the engine bay if it needs to be serviced. The cowl of the old car ends right about here, so the motor will be very close to the face of the cowl underneath the hood. So I'll be trimming this pocket out so that hopefully this is easily accessed. You'll go inside the car and remove the front of the dashboard and release the pin up there, and then be able to drag this whole thing with arms and everything out from under the cowl. This will all be abbreviated to about here, so it's all part of a compact unit. But that's, again, well, there's a saying in the South here, stand back, I'm fixing to make it better, which basically means I'm going to take something that works pretty decent and I'm going to make it not work at all. So what I've done was I created a new finish arm that had a little bit of a crook in it, just so that it would clearance the defroster ducts a little bit better, so that I could put a more substantial defroster duct in. Everything looked peachy keen when I set it up, but I had just the pickup flange here that picked up my rotation point was just a round piece of 1/2 inch tubing with a nut and for adjustment, and then it had a flat plate on it, which was somewhere in this neighborhood on this mock-up rod. Well, just taking this and sweeping this at this angle, I figured, well, as long as this point and this point are the same distance, there's an imaginary line that comes straight through here that basically emulates this straight bar. Well, I neglected to take this tab and do what I did here, which was to take and extend this tab out so that it actually, if you put a straight edge on it, it's actually in the same plane as the two pivot holes on either end now, which doesn't look like it would be that big of a deal, but like I said, it went from working decent to not working at all. It was pretty bad. But anyway, I'm trying to move forward. I'm not 100% sure that this is even going to work, but we'll see what happens. I just thought I'd show you the intent behind recreating this bar. Instead of it going at an angle up to that point, it is straight, and then it makes a cut back. And what that does is it gives me a little more clearance for this defroster. And then over there I have about the same amount. Nothing's changed for that one. It's mainly the driver's side I was concerned with. It was pretty blocked off. So you can also see that I moved this tab out so that it was in the same location as originally on the other bar. And I tacked this fixture here at the proper angle and the proper distance from the end of the pivot point. Now I'm just basically remaking some of these other pieces that hook it up. This is a little rod that I had that I kind of had it in there, and I was rotating it to get the best angle to get the heim joints to run as free as possible. You can see it has a bend in it. Once I established the angle, I took another piece of tubing and I attached another. These are just 1/4-20 nuts, and where that goes now is up inside here, and it'll bolt right to here, and of course then this will bolt to the other arm on this side, but this through bolts right through that face right there. And anyway, this is kind of a kooky little bar, but this whole thing's a little kooky. Anyway, back to it. So anyway, here it is with all the modifications. First you see this little fork that bolts in through the top here, that had that little bent piece on it that connects to this rod over here. Also, the rod was coming awfully close to the box, so I decided to add a curved shape to it in order for it to just comfortably clear that. And I'm going to turn it on, and you could see how it actuates. And you can see how that curve shape is making allowance for that air conditioning box right there. And you can also see that I have a lot more clearance to put my defroster ducts in over here, which was my main goal when I decided to straighten this out. The next up will be coming up with a permanent mount for the motor that can be pulled out from the engine compartment. We'll see how that goes. So even though I'm not using it, I saved the old cowl as a good reference as to how everything should clear and where everything should be located. You can see I put this overall template that I made up back on the car in order to make sure that this height is correct as far as where this is sitting right now. And the reason I put this on here is to make sure that I haven't made any egregious screw-ups as far as things that I've done so far that might interfere with this. Also, I'm trying to determine the height of some braces that I'll be using to mount this motor to. So I want to make sure that this cowl is where it needs to go. And one little discovery I'm not too crazy about is this is a cross-engine compartment bar here that stiffens up the shock towers, and as you can see under the hood, there's it's a 1/4 inch spacer right there sitting right on top of that. So That means that this bar is going to have to be reconfigured in order to clear the understructure of the hood, and I hope it doesn't interfere with anything as far as how high up above the engine it is, valve covers, things like that. So a lot of guys just eliminate that. I prefer to keep that in there, especially with something like this. It's got a 392 in it, and there's a lot of torque there. Definitely want to keep all the suspension pieces that are designed for this car intact. My next step here is to add these two pieces of 3/8 tubing, heavy wall 3/8 tubing. It's an ID of 1/4 inch, OG 3/8. And what these will do is create mount points for tabs to mount this bar to the car. I've got one on the other side over there, just coming across the top here, and I'll mount my tabs right here. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you that before I get too carried away. As a guide to mounting these, or making my tabs, my mount tabs, this is the 2011 Challenger windshield wiper mechanism, what's left of it. And you can see these two, one's an oval hole, and on the opposite side there's a round hole. So what I've got here is two isolators with this little hard stop in the sleeve, I should say, to make sure that you don't over tighten the mount. So I'll use these as a guide to make my steel tabs, and these just fit on there like that, and then this screws in through another tab that's mounted to the car. You want these isolators on here. You don't ever want to hard mount these motors. There's a lot of torque in those little motors, and they'll just, if anything gets in the way or they hang up in any way, they'll just grind right through whatever it is. Speaking from experience, horrific experience, I might add. Okay, once again, trying to weld in this area with everything going on. I'm pulling up welding blankets. I'm doing everything to isolate, putting down tin foil across my any wiring and stuff like that, trying to isolate this one little area so that I minimize any possible damage that I might do with a little hot ball here and there. So this will kind of give you a better idea of what's going on now. Here's a tab with a captured nut welded onto these bars. You can see here I have the rubber isolators in, and I'm bolted through to attach to those tabs with the captured nuts. Now I've got to double check and make sure I got to put this panel back on, this upper cowl, make sure I've got enough room not only for the cowl itself, but which I think I do. That doesn't seem to be a problem, but I'm also going to put a shallow plenum underneath of the grill work in order to guide the air down into this cold air duct over here, take fresh air into the car, so that it'll be functional. I've got one more isolator that I have to deal with. That's this rubber isolator attached to the motor over here. Normally where that attaches as part of a 3-point mounting system it's that rubber isolator slides right into here, and then there were 2 points on either side that those rubber isolators that I have in here now bolted up to for the original mechanism. But so I'm going to have to get kind of tricky to get up underneath of that thing and get this bracket mounted up, so that ought to be fun. Alright, it might be a little difficult to see, but you can see I cut that bracket that holds the rubber mount or isolator on the windshield wiper motor off of that cross mount bar that goes across the engine bay. And I took the remnants of it, and it's kind of difficult to see, but you can see I fed it up from the back side behind the motor, and then I created a gusset to weld it right to the firewall itself at the angle that the motor's sitting at. So very no easy way to do this. I have to put another gusset on the other side, but what I'm going to do, because it's so difficult to get to is now I'm going to try and pull this motor out of here and make that gusset so I can have a little bit of a cleaner situation here as far as what it looks like. But you can see I went through a lot of trouble to, you know, completely envelop this thing in tinfoil to keep hot balls from going down in the insulation. There's a lot going on back there in plastic and stuff like that. Of course, you can see that if you're willing to completely take the car apart, you know, this wouldn't be as big of a deal, but you have to know exactly where you're going to put this stuff. You got to know what it's going to interfere with. It's hard to do if you take everything out of the car to see what's going to be an issue, because there's lots of hidden traps as far as little things that are in the way, little tabs, little plastic pieces, wiring harnesses, things like that. So anyway, no easy way to do it, but that's the beginnings of that bottom mount right there. And you can see right here the isolators. This tab is attached to here. I still have to cut this free. These tabs are welded now to these bars over here. So the two top tabs are in, and I just had to put that third mounting point in there to secure it, to keep it from you know, rotating. With everything out of the way now, you can see the importance of this being on 3 rubber isolators. As you can see when it's running, there's a slight oscillation. I don't know if you can see it from here in the motor itself. It's moving, and those rubber isolators are taking up a little bit of the torque on the motor. So it lends for smoother operation and also quiets the interaction of the motor with the chassis. Okay, this is kind of one of the most important things of this whole scenario, and that's, will I be able to uninstall this motor with the cowl permanently in place? So I clamped the cowl into place, and I went about uninstalling by taking these two bolts loose and then pulling it free from the rubber mount. Now it's pulled out far enough that I could reach the actuator arm at the base, being careful not to bend any of the other arms or force them in any way. So now I'll just there's a nut on the end here, and I'll just undo that little nylock lock nut, and I'll be able to take this whole thing out. Obviously, it won't be that easy once the hood's on the car. Probably have to take the hood off the car in order to do this operation, but hopefully you won't be changing your windshield wiper motors out as often as you do your oil. Hopefully it'll never have to come out of there. Anyway, just thought I'd show you that part. Alright, with the compartment clear, I just thought I'd show you what this looks like. And here's that arm. You can see the arm can be pulled out this far, which is plenty far beyond the finished cowl. This blue line is the finished cowl up here, so that you can disconnect it from the shaft on the motor, which is this stud that I have welded here to this arm. Now, I had to cheat a little bit to get it out here the initial time, because I had to make some clearances here to pull the this pipe out of here, because this pipe was this much longer, because I could only cut it on this side over here with everything in place. So this initial disassembly, I had the entire length of this pipe, another 1.5 inches or so on either side. Now that I have it out, I was able to trim it off flush so that it actually will fit in straight in between these bars. Before, it was getting caught behind the sheet metal right here, and then once I got it forward, it was getting caught underneath these bars, which I expected that to happen. I thought I could just shuffle it out, but anyway, that's just a little minor aside. This is the lower mount for the rubber isolator that's on the bottom of the motor here. It slides into that straight forward, so that just rolls up once you get these two top nuts out on either side. And as you can see, what's nice about these is the bolts kind of hang. There's a little sleeve in here that keeps you from over tightening these rubber grommets, and it bottoms out on the flange, but it also retains these, so it's a little bit easier to get in there and position it without these bolts falling out of the holes. Anyway, that's what it looks like there. I have a lot more work to do. that's not the end of the wiper situation here. As I said before, this has to be, when this is connected, the car is all reconnected, and we're able to use the actual switch in the car to find out where the motor comes to rest in its park location. I'll have to release this nut off of this shaft and then rotate this arm and reinstall it, because this is a spline stub here, and in the position where the park location is actually correspondent to the park location of the wipers. Right now, I have no idea. You can't set that up because I don't have a park sensor in my little simple circuit to run this motor while I'm doing the testing. But anyway, that's down the road a little bit. So I won't be installing the top cowl permanently until such time as I'm sure that all of that is working correctly. But I have a lot more work to do in this area. I have to make another mount to replace this mount, or figure out a way to clearance. I probably might just end up clearancing this area over here so that you can access this with a long ratchet, because this doesn't interfere with the upper cowl. I might just trim it off a little bit here. So I have that to do. I have to box a lot of this in just for security. I'm treating this as the inside of the car here, just so you know. This is not going to be watertight here. I'm just going to box it out just for stability and strength of the windshield bed. The grill work in the upper side of the cowl will be dammed off with a shallow plenum that will come out and across and dump into here, so that any water that gets into there will be channeled off into this area over here, which drains out the bottom of the car. The only other issue I'm going to have is going to be creating a small catch to guide any water that comes down off of these shafts, gets by the upper seal in the cowl. There's an upper seal, a little foam seal up on top, and that's the only thing between the outside water infiltrating and this shaft. So I'll have to have a little catch basin and guide that out of the structure on both sides. So quite a bit of work left to do on this side, and then we'll get onto this side, which is a little bit more detailed. This involves the ducting for the HVAC system and making sure that's all clear. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.